Welcome back to the Washington Reporter podcast. I'm your host, Jacob Wool. Ernie Veritimos is here as always. Ernie, what's up?
I am space ready, Jacob.
Well, that's right. We're going to be talking about this Space Force. It is the sixth branch of the military Trump is planning to start. That is just coming across the wire now. We're going to get into it. We've got a lot to talk about today. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the latest attacks from the media against Trump, his concentration camps, the child kidnapping rings. I mean, these people sound like pizza gators. We're going to get into all of it. And we're also going to talk about the latest Spygate revelations. We actually do know now who the other spy was, the other informant, the one that Michael Caputo had alluded to several weeks ago. Unfortunately, he didn't leak it to us. It got out there, though, and the Washington Post got it. We're going to get into all of that right here on the show. It should be fantastic. It's going to be great. We're going to...
and one more thing. We're potentially adopting a new standard on trying to analyze Trump activity and how he actually rules. I wanted to at least cover it in this article.
We'll have to...
Daniel Greenfield. The Trump's 5 rules for ruling the world. It's kind of, Sun Tzu, Art of War type of thing.
Right. A philosophical overview. Well, we'll get into it. We've got a lot to get into. But first of all, we've got to talk about this concentration camp. Who knew? Trump scored this big victory with North Korea last week, just as the media discovered the fact that he is running, Ernie, concentration camps. They're taking the children, they're snatching them up, and they're shipping them off to the camps. At least if you listen to the mainstream media, that's what you would think. Here's an opening clip from MSNBC, just to give everybody the flavor of this. I just want people to hear just how out of control these people are and just listen to the fervor. One of the guys on this set is actually Michael Steele, the former head of the Republican National Convention, former head of the RNC. You got to hear this. Here's the clip.
It is not the law to separate, and this is an important fact check. Yeah. It is not the law to separate parents and children at the border. That is not the law. It is their interpretation of the law.
But that's just not true. It is the law, of course. The Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals said if a parent gets arrested, you cannot send the kids to jail. You've got to put them in foster care. But they continue.
Or used to be America's greatest democracy.
Did you know that we used to be America's greatest democracy? What the hell does...
You and I were both watching the hearings separately here, and the Democrats kept on referring to this whole process as part of our democracy. And I kept on saying, no, we're not a democracy. You socialists want it to be a democracy, but it's not a democracy. We are a republic.
But according to these people, they used to be America's greatest democracy. Whatever that means, they were America's greatest democracy.
I have no idea.
We can't find a solution to this problem without harming children, without putting them into concentration camps.
And I would even say, Stephanie, to that point, it's not even an interpretation of the law. It is a policy.
A new policy.
It is a policy that has been invoked by the President of the United States.
Right. And that's incorrect. If you read the law, my understanding of it anyways, I only saw a brief that when a parent is has committed a crime and they're taken incarcerated, you have a number of things that you can do with the children. I mean, you have choices, and I think they go in order of, from best to worst.
Right.
And I think the best case is to give them back to the children. The next case is to give them to a relative, not in the United States, but a relative that is, available. I think putting them into some kind of foster care, if you can do that, and then the last thing is to put them into some kind of reasonable holding facility or whatever,
like a group home, right?
This the tent city.
Right. So that's all true. I just want to finish up this clip here, but I've got something to share on that that you're not going to hear anywhere else.
Who goes out and quotes the Bible, by the way, a passage that was used to justify slavery in this country, to justify encamping children. I call this a concentration camp for kids, because that's exactly what it's turning out to. When you give kids 22 hours of lockup time and 2 hours of airtime, what else can it be? And if this is where this country is going, the American people need to wake up and pay attention, because your kids could be next.
Right.
Oh, what?
your kids.
The same treatment is garnered any person in the United States. So in other words, if I have a kid and say I'm a single parent and I get arrested and thrown into jail, well, my children go through the exact same process.
Right. There are only two logical extensions of what the left is calling for. The first one is to let the kids share a jail cell with the parents. Now, obviously, the court's already ruled you can't do that, so that one's out. But that's one logical extension. The only other logical extension would be for Trump to stop prosecuting people who come here illegally, essentially opening up the borders. Of course, that is what they want. They want Trump to completely stop prosecuting illegals because it's racist, and concentration camps because that's a buzzword. That's what they want. And it's funny to me, Ernie, because you've got this classical leftist hypocrisy here. You know, in one breath, you have Democrats saying that Trump should be impeached if he interferes with the Department of Justice to influence their enforcement actions in the Russia investigation. And on the other hand, you have leftists saying that Trump must interfere and he must obstruct the DOJ and he must stop them from prosecuting illegal immigrants.
Right, right. So, you know, he keeps on saying, look, it's the Democrats' fault that they need to pass some law. They're being obstructionists. And they're saying, no, you can just go in there and just wave your finger and make it happen.
Right. They're saying, and they're demanding he do that.
Yes.
They're demanding he do that. And it's just, it is fascinating. You know, if he goes into the DOJ and he exercises his rightful authority, but he does so to stop this witch hunt, which is an opposition research operation for the Democrats for the midterms. If he stops that, that's obstruction. He's got to be impeached. Even Republicans say that. Even the Republican rhinos say that. But yet they're calling on him to, with the stroke of a pen, with the tapping of a sword, make the Department of Justice not enforce our border laws and not have a zero tolerance policy for people who come here illegally. They're saying deal with it in civil court. Well, how do you deal with it in civil court? You can't enforce a judgment against an illegal immigrant. It's impossible. It is a complete hypocrisy. It's a joke. And, you know, Ernie, a lot of people maybe don't know this, but my mom does this for a living. She works in the social welfare field, came up as a social worker, and now manages like 2,500 of them. And what she was telling me recently is that the feds are pouring so much money into placing illegal immigrant kids into foster care. They're actually paying more if you take an illegal immigrant kid as opposed to an American kid, that they can't even get American kids, whether they be black, white, Hispanic, whatever. They can't even get them placed into a foster home. They can't even get them into a situation because you've got so many illegals pouring in every day and they pay more for them. It's just it's a better price for group homes and foster homes.
Right. And so what they're doing really effectively is they're sending a message to the people of Mexico that want to come across the border to just basically say, look, bring your kid and then say that you're being abused or whatever it is, anything, so that you can then, you know, usurp these laws. And so they want Trump now to rescind his zero tolerance policy and allow anybody through. And as long as they have a good story, they can come through. So,
and the first outrage was, and it didn't stick. You saw them try this, but it didn't quite stick. Is their first outrage last week was, well, Sessions is saying that they're no longer going to take asylum seekers for domestic violence. And that was their big thing. They said, oh my God, he hates victims of domestic violence. That was going to be their outrage. But the problem is most folks looked at that and they said, duh. Like, of course, if you're a victim of domestic violence, you need a new boyfriend, not a new country.
Right.
I mean, really,
how can you prove it anyways? Or how can we validate it?
Really think of that. I mean, think of if an American went up to Canada and said, my boyfriend's yelling at me and he's verbally abusive, or my boyfriend's beating me up, let me in. They would laugh at you, first of all, and then they'd turn you around on the first bus out of there so quick you'd make your head spin. Or you went to Mexico and you said, I'm coming to Mexico, you're going to give me citizenship and you're going to give me welfare because my boyfriend beat me up or my girlfriend beat me up or whatever beat me up. It's ridiculous.
Well, you know what I don't understand is the government of Mexico doing anything to communicate to these people what the potential harm is if they go to the border with their children?
Well, no. And the frank reality is if they make it here, there's no harm. I mean, if they make it, obviously the kids die in the desert all the time and they dehydrate and everything else. And that's the first thing. I mean, talk about, you know, whatever the situation is, parents arrested, what have you. If a parent's dragging their kid up through the Sonora desert or dragging their kid over a fence, they don't deserve to have the kid anyway. That's child endangerment.
A lot of people aren't aware of just what it's like to walk through the desert. Have you ever walked through the desert?
Oh, yeah.
So walking through the desert, let me just say this. I am an experienced hiker. I hike, you know, on average 6 miles a day. So I'm putting in, 30 miles a week. Now, granted, I'm not walking through deserts, but I've walked through some pretty, tough areas. I went to the desert last year to Anza Borrego in California. Mm-hmm. And we took with us a liter of water. We thought, okay, we had a 1.5 mile walk. We thought, no problem. We went through that 1.5 liters, a third of the way through, and we were that was it. We couldn't go any further. We had to actually turn back.
Right. So the very idea that, imagine dragging an infant through that. You'd have your kid taken by CPS so quick, you wouldn't believe it. But this idea that they need special treatment, and really what it is it's very simple. Why this now? Well, number one, it's an opportunity to try to steal the wind out of Trump's sails from the North Korea victory. Number one. But the bigger part of this is they are in the back channels as we speak, both Republicans like Lindsey Graham and Democrats, as we speak, are working on several bills that are mass amnesty bills. And they're pushing these bills as hard as they can right now. They're doing what they know how to do best, which is use children. They do this on gun control. They do this on immigration. They use and abuse and exploit children. It's all they know how to do. And they're pushing.
When the Obama administration was doing the exact same thing.
Oh, can't talk about that, though. It didn't happen. It's fake news.
But it did.
Yeah. So they're pushing for mass amnesty because they know that if they don't get a big wave of illegal immigrant voters that are put onto the rolls for 2018, it's game over. It's game over. They know that there's no blue wave. That has now played out in several elections. There is no edge in the polls for Democrats in 2018. The economy's booming. And so they're saying, okay, we're going to pay these people. And it's not just immigration. Immigration is where you have a flow of people that come in for one reason or another, and they're seeking out free market opportunity. This is not that. What you've got in Europe is not that. It is immigrants being paid to show up at the door. They're being paid to show up at the door. And you know what's really disturbing to me is that now you've got a couple of Trump allies who are flanking him, basically, or supposed Trump allies that are flanking him, basically. Here's Alan Dershowitz. Here's Alan Dershowitz, who has been a Trump ally, but here's what he said this morning on Fox and Friends.
But I would like to take 1 minute and just say something directly to President Trump. Look, he watches the show. President Trump, I've been defending your civil liberties and will continue to do so on this show, but you have to end this policy of separating parents from children, not because of the parents, but because of the children. It imposes a trauma on the children. It's just unacceptable. It's just not proper. There are other ways of doing this. You can send the parents and the children back together. You can do other things, but separating parents from children, no matter where you put them, no matter how the facilities may look, and my former student, Joel Pollack, says they look like decent facilities. It's not the facilities. It's the act of separating the parents from the children. Right. And Mr. President, it just has to stop. There are better ways of doing this. You're better than this. The American people are better than this.
I'll stop him there. But that was Dershowitz this morning. And look, a lot of what he says is true. It's not a good business to be in. It's all very ugly business. You talk about separating kids. It's not fun. There's no doubt about it, but somebody's got to do it. The parents break our laws. They've got to be punished for it. It is what it is. The really simple solution is if you don't want to be separated from your kids, don't come to our country illegally. It's very simple. Simple equation.
Well, that's why I was asking if they're being informed or at least told in some sort of uncertain terms what the risks are that they're taking from the Mexican government.
Well,
the Mexican government would say something.
They're not told. They don't want these people either. They're not, as Trump often says, they're not sending their best. Here's what Scaramucci had to say this morning.
He won't like that. Okay, so Anthony, listen, your tweet makes no sense. It's not what the president wants. Congress must act. The president could stop this morning.
Well, I think you should. Well, first of all, okay. So there were a lot of tweets I sent out yesterday, and I was sparring with a couple of Democrats, but I think the president should stop it. I think that the optics of the situation, however we got there, whether it was an Obama policy, it was a George W. Bush policy.
They didn't separate children from their parents.
Whatever the facts are, I'm not here to defend the Democrats or the Republicans. I'm here to say that it's very bad policy, and that the president is a humane guy. He's doing an amazing job on so many different fronts, and he doesn't need this type of visual or this type of imagery, okay, aside from which is inhumane and it's cruel, which I absolutely don't like. I think he needs to step back, stop listening to his aides and his advisors.
There is no imagery. There is no children in cages. It's not a real thing. It's fake. So you're going to make policy based on imagery.
There is some percentage. Now, first of all, you're right for the most part, but you can't separate it. There are some children that are being separated. In fact, they have 500 children in these tent cities, so there is at least some number. Now, it's a relatively small number compared to the total number of people that are coming through, but they are there, and there is optics here, and he has to deal with those optics. I'm just waiting to see what he's going to do to turn it around to the Democrats to make them look like, or have their jaws drop, say, oh, now what do we do?
Oh, I'll tell you what he's going to do. And this is what he does consistently. He boxes out the middle. He takes the middle position and forces the Democrats to then go far left. He calls MS-13 animals. It forces them to defend MS-13. They have to do the opposite of what he does. Mm-hmm. They have to be antithetical to everything he does. And so he takes the middle ground and forces them out. Here's what Trump said today. He said something that I think all Americans support. He said the U.S. isn't going to be a dumping ground. You actually found this clip. Here it is.
And I'll say it very honestly, and I'll say it very straight. Immigration is the fault and all of the problems that we're having, because we cannot get them to sign legislation. We cannot get them even to the negotiating table. And I say it's very strongly the Democrats' fault. They're they're really obstructionist, and they are obstructing. The United States will not be a migrant camp, and it will not be a refugee holding facility. Won't be. You look at what's happening in Europe, you look at what's happening in other places. We can't allow that to happen to the United States, not on my watch.
So they'll call that racist, of course, but it's just true. Germany's been ruined. The country's ruined. It's irreparably damaged.
Oh, and Merkel's suffering for it right now.
Oh, yeah. She's about to get booted out of there. You look at what's going on in France. France has been destroyed, top to bottom, almost completely gone.
Italy doesn't want it to happen there. They're refusing everybody.
Yeah, they're refusing everybody, which they probably should before it's too late. So you do have this going on in Europe, and people are awake to it. The mainstream media can shame him for it all they want, but it's true. So my prediction is Trump will win on this. We've got a little bit more to talk about with this later in the show, but
I have an answer. I have an answer. You put big, huge billboards right over the border about what the in Mexican, of course, what the consequences are if you bring your child over this border.
Right.
I don't know. There's got to be something.
Well, there's a good way to stop it. The wall's underway. That will help. I mean, it's pretty hard to schlep your kid over a 100-foot tall wall. So that should be a good start. He's already got $1.6 billion funded out of 25, and a lot more on its way, I'm sure, in the next round of budgeting. So we're going to talk more about that. I've got a report that I've got to mention later in the show, just to point out and juxtapose kind of what Obama did with this and some of the human trafficking and everything else that people should stay tuned for. But first, I want to talk about the latest Spygate revelations, what we've learned from Roger Stone and Michael Caputo. Surprisingly honest reporting from the Washington Post on this. We tried to get the scoop. I was contacting Caputo. I was contacting his associates. I was trying to get the name of this guy. And finally, we know. So you're going to read a lot of things out there. You're going to read a lot of things that are true. You're going to read a lot of things that are false. I'm going to give you the straight scoop right now on what's going on with this, what happened, and what sort of legal jeopardy Roger Stone and Michael Caputo are now faced with. So what we now know is that there was another spy going after the Trump campaign, guy named Greenberg. Okay, he goes by the name Greenberg. He's used several other names over the years. This guy's immigration records have been pulled, and on his immigration records, he lists his occupation as FBI informant. And he provides a contact at the FBI for reference. Who's a real FBI agent? So that's where he came from Russia, what he came from Russia to do. And he's supposedly done it for 17 years. Now, he insists that his meeting with Roger Stone, in which he offered dirt on Hillary Clinton for $2 million, the low price of $2 million, and Roger Stone almost immediately walked out of the meeting and texted Caputo and said, this guy's a joke, next, basically. Well, this guy insists that in that capacity, when he met with Roger Stone, he was not acting as an FBI informant. That was the one day out of the year where he said, I'm not an FBI informant. I just need to go offer some dirt to the Trump campaign, some Russian dirt. I mean, give me a break, Ernie.
And also, he didn't want to give the $2 million to Roger. He specifically said it had to go directly to the president.
Right. It had to be paid for by Trump directly.
By Trump. Well, he wasn't the president then, but
yeah. Trump directly needed to sign the check. I mean, geez.
It's like big flashing lights, big neon flashing strobe lights.
And so Roger Stone walked right out of there. He texted Caputo and said, this guy's a joke, whatever. Next. The problem that Stone's running into now is that he was asked by Congress and he was asked by Mueller and others if he had any contacts with Russians. Alex Jones was asked if any of his contributors, contacts, XYZ, had any contacts with any other Russians. And on every count, all these people said no. Now, it turns out this guy's not really a Russian. He was given special immigration status, flown in, given special take, just like with Natalia Veselnitskaya, the Trump Tower lawyer, that Russian lawyer, just like she was, special status, expedited visa, you name it. He was given the same thing. So he wasn't really a Russian. So they can kind of slide on that, but he is Russian in ethnicity. He does speak Russian. So it can fall on both sides of the coin there. But the bottom line is, I think they're going to try to get Stone. I think they're going to try to get Alex Jones. I think they're going to try to get Caputo on line to the FBI charges. Michael Flynn special.
Which is weird. I mean, there's going to be more lying to the FBI charges here than ever before in any other type of single case. And all the lying was the result of the FBI using informants and operatives to push the information on one side and then pull it out on the other.
And then twist it, even in some cases, where they push it in, twist it backwards using some modifier person in the middle, and then they pull it back out and it's different, and they say, oh, you're lying.
Yeah, and so the original source of the information wasn't even from, the people that we're trying to guard against. They're people that the FBI put in there for the purpose of entrapment. I mean, that's what this really is.
A really good example of it. They put Greenberg in there, and he says he's a Russian. So now they met with a Russian, as far as they know.
Right.
They then tell them, actually, no, this guy's an FBI informant. He's not a Russian. And then they ask him, did you meet with any Russians? And they say, no, I didn't meet with any Russians because this guy's not a Russian. He's an FBI informant, right? So they say no. Well, then they decide, actually, we're going to call this guy a Russian now. And you told us you didn't meet with any Russians. And so you lied and you're going to jail. That's the push, twist, and pull technique that they've been doing here. It's classic.
Well, it's going to be hard for them to prove. The problem is that Stone and Jones and Caputo are all going to have to defend themselves against this charade. And it's going to cost them a lot of money.
Yeah.
Just to prove something that shouldn't even have to be proven.
Right. It's going to cost them hundreds of thousands of dollars, basically. $200,000-$300,000 is what it costs to take on a Robert Mueller. It's not cheap. It's not cheap at all.
Right. That if Mueller didn't exist, the problem never would have happened.
Right. And there's still no collusion. You still can't find any real collusion. There's no real person or real situation or real meetup or real anything that anyone can point to that's not an FBI setup.
And if you just take the spirit of the law, they're trying to find collusion. And then, Stone, he has no intent to do collusion. He thought this guy was a jamoke and he said, get lost.
of course, Adam Schiff, and I quote here, said that Stone's testimony appears to be inaccurate or deliberately misleading. Similarly, Michael Caputo's testimony omitted mention of this interaction with a Russian offering dirt on Hillary Clinton, but he's not a Russian. He works for the FBI.
All they care about is numbers. Remember, we said that before. Mueller is looking to pad his numbers.
I went in and I went to try to search the Federal Records Procurement Database, as I do in these cases, to see if I can find payments to these people. And you know what was funny is that as soon as the Washington Post report came out, guess what happened? The site was taken down for 3 days. I said, oh, we'll be back on Tuesday. Site's down. Can't even search. Could be a coincidence. Could not be. But it was very interesting.
Well, so that was the other interesting thing that, and I had mentioned this to you, and you had tried it in, that the Washington Post report was surprisingly kind to Roger Stone. In fact, I thought it was a fairly well-balanced report. And you know that is not the Washington Post that we all know. They're usually just tigers and just go after and twist every single fact. But here they've reported it fairly well. And actually they were giving Stone kind of credit that, this really wasn't any big deal.
Right.
I mean, that's how I took it.
Right. Because it really wasn't. I mean, they got the text messages. They said Mueller's got his text messages. Yeah. But what did the text messages say? Said, oh, typical nutty Russian. Yeah. Typical nutty Russian. Nothing. We moved on. You're like, that's it. All right. Well, we'll see who else we get. I mean, that was it. It was 5 minutes. And he wasn't really a Russian. See, in every event, whether you talk about the Trump Tower meeting, whether you talk about Carter Page or Papadopoulos mouthing off in a bar in London, or whether you talk about this, it always turns out that these Russians are not really Russians.
They're plants.
They're plants. They're informants. They're spies. Whatever word you want to use. They're spies. They're Spygate. Right. They're spies.
So Mueller is using them to gin up or make it appear as if they are colluding by bringing in his own operatives and then pumping information on one side and then pulling it out the other and say, look, we got people that were doing collusion.
Right. And
with our own people.
One of the things that Greenberg's saying now that's going to be interesting, and Mueller's going to have to come down on one side or the other on this, which is going to be interesting to see, is that Greenberg now insists that he did not make any such offer and says that he met with Roger Stone at the restaurant and brought along a Russian friend of his named Alexei. And he won't give his last name. He just says his name is Alexei. And that guy, Alexei, worked for the Clinton Foundation, but was a Russian and could give Roger Stone real dirt if he wanted to pay for it.
Now that I would believe. He worked for the Clinton Foundation.
Right. That's where the Russians are doing most of their colluding, is through the Clintons. 145 million here, 5 million there, you name it. Okay. So he says they work for the Clinton Foundation. Now, here's the thing. Stone says, no, there was no other person. He texted that at the time, contemporaneously, said there's no other person. It was just him. The Clinton Foundation says they've never had an employee named Alexei in the first place. And no witnesses at the restaurant recall seeing another person. Now, obviously, the security footage is already destroyed because it was nothing happened. Like if there's a robbery, they'll save the footage. If not, it deletes after a week. But so there is no Alexei. So the question is that going to be Mueller's line? Is Mueller going to say that there was another person there or not? I mean, that's going to be interesting. Just one little tidbit of all this.
What would be the point, though? Why would he even bring this person up? And especially if they have ties to the Clinton Foundation. That certainly wouldn't look good on Mueller and not on Hillary. I mean, that just adds to this whole idea that they're planting information.
Well, I mean, we know that they don't really. I mean, I don't think
more Russians.
His appearance.
Just more Russians? Is that what it is?
Yeah, I heard a fifth person was removed from the Mueller team last week. That was reported in the Daily Caller. A fifth one now is gone. We don't know which one. He won't say. Another one caught for sending anti-Trump text messages. I've heard it was Janae Ray, the former Clinton Foundation lawyer that was working on Mueller's team, but I can't confirm that quite yet. So it's really crazy. It is really, really interesting. And I guess all we can do is we can keep following it and try to keep people up to speed, because there's so much nonsense out there. There's so much conspiracy theory. There's so much garbage. I hope we can keep people level-headed to the facts and understanding what's going to happen next. But it looks like Roger Stone and Caputo are just going to get charged. You know, they leak it, they go to grand jury, they get an indictment. That's how this has been working. Pretty tried and true formula. So we'll have to see. We'll stay posted on it. But next, we've got to talk about the Space Force, a new branch of the military designed to do battle in space. Trump talked about it at Miramar Air Base. He was ridiculed. They said that's silly. They said it's never going to happen. Well, today he formally directed the Department of Defense, the Pentagon, to begin work on forming a Space Force.
Puts a whole new meaning to boots on the ground.
Oh, yeah. Puts a whole new meaning to boots on the ground. Now, of course, this is going to take an act of Congress to do, I hear. It's already receiving condemnation, of course, from Democrats, but also from never Trump Republicans. They're already attacking this. It'll be interesting to see what happens. Do you think this is going to happen, Ernie? Do you think he's going to be able to pull it through? I do, frankly.
Oh, absolutely. If Trump wants something done, it's going to get done.
Yeah. I mean,
he's been talking about this for a long time.
Yeah. He's going to get his Space Force. Now, you were mentioning this is probably a Cold War style move to make the Chinese step up and the Russians step up too.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
And
force them to show their hand and spend trillions of dollars, and we'll basically beat them to it.
Right. Because of course we will win, because we'll unleash the free market, and they'll be busy with either, crony capitalism or outright central planning, communist style in the case of China.
Trump's way to win the trade war.
Yeah. I mean, he, and this is the unique part about Trump, talking big picture here, is that everything this guy does, it takes a whole approach, an all-around approach, where he doesn't think of, okay, we're going to have a Department of Commerce and a Department of Defense and a Department of Science and Innovation, and those things are going to all work on their separate silos. He combines them all. Mm-hmm. He says, okay, trade is going to be related to South China Sea, is going to be related to North Korea, and we're going to roll out a Space Force, and we're going to impose tariffs, and it's all part of the same thing, but it's all part of American dominance. That's the central guiding theme. Now, you pointed out this article early in the show. Tell me what this is about. What is this this methodology for interpreting Trump? All
right, this is out of Front Page Mag. It's by Daniel Greenfield, and it's called Trump's 5 Rules for Ruling the World. And when I first started to read this, I thought the immediate thought was, this is Trump style Sun Tzu art of war, right? And basically there are 5 principles, and they're pretty, I'll just go through them quickly. But, I was thinking that what we should be doing, Jacob, is that every time that, he makes one of these moves, maybe assign it and see if whether or not that falls inside one of these rules. So rule number 1 is act, don't react. Always take the initiative. Don't ever let the other side get the upper hand. Be ahead of the game. And then the second rule is try everything. And this is kind of like that, the Space Force. This is try everything, right? Just throw anything out there and just totally confuse and keep your opponent off balance. And then third is chaos is power. So as long as he can keep everybody just apoplectic, and then just turn things around. We've seen him do this a million times to the Dems. He'll propose something that puts them on their heels, that they just, they tear their hair out. You can just see the flames coming out.
Yeah. I mean, he'll be working on tax cuts, and then he'll start a fight with the NFL, and he'll get distracted over there, and then he gets the tax cuts done.
Right. And then number 4 is never show your hand. So that's kind of the poker in him. And then the 5th one is, and this is a good one, don't be afraid to be the bad guy.
Yeah. Wow. That's those are pretty apt things. Those are good observations. I'm glad we stumbled across that, but these are the central, not themes, but methodologies that he puts into place.
Yep.
This is what he does.
Yeah, so with all the Democrats looking at him thinking that he's some kind of idiot, that he doesn't have a plan, that he's really doing everything by the seat of his pants, everything that he does is calculated. Everything that he does is meant to keep the opponent off balance and to maintain the upper hand, to lead the argument, to lead the conversation, everything.
Right. We saw this with North Korea. They said he's going down there. He doesn't know what he's doing. He's going to get worked by Kim Jong-un. He's going to shine Kim Jong-un's shoes, and he's going to walk out of there with nothing, and we're going to war, folks. He went down there. They had a nice lunch. Lasted about 4, 5, 6 hours. They signed a deal. Everything went as planned. They went their separate ways. Really, really a non-event. It really something that everybody knew was going to happen, that was smart, and something that the markets certainly knew was going to happen. Look at what the markets did that day. Not much.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody who's putting money on this stuff knows what's really happening. Because if you don't, you're going to lose it all. So you'd better know what's going on. So you watch
Sun Tzu Trump.
Yeah, it's precisely that. Precisely that. Now, getting back to this immigration thing, I was thinking, I read this op-ed this morning. I didn't read it. I looked at it and I vomited, but it got into my eyes. It got into my eyes. I didn't read it. It's like, bear spray. It gets into your eyes sometimes. And it's by Charles M. Blow at the New York Times. And, he's blocked me on Twitter, but his stuff is out there and the leftists eat it up. It's an op-ed, New York Times this morning. He says, Trump and the baby snatchers. It's a grand narrative about how Trump is running a human trafficking ring and that he's taking the babies away from the Mexicans because he's a stone-cold racist, folks. And it got me thinking, and it reminded me of a report, and I couldn't remember where I had read it, but it reminded me of a report that came out in 2016. And so I started Googling around and looking around, and I found the report. The report, of course, was from New York Magazine. The title of the report was, Obama administration handed child migrants over to human traffickers. This is New York Magazine. We're not talking 4chan here. We're not talking QAnon. We're not talking Pizzagate.net or whatever. This is New York Magazine. Obama administration handed child migrants over to human traffickers. Here's from the article. I'll read you a piece. It says, the United States government placed an unknown number of Central American migrant children into the custody of human traffickers after neglecting to run the most basic checks on these so-called caregivers, according to a Senate report released on Thursday. They handed over children to human traffickers during the Obama administration.
You mean the people that showed up at the office and say, yep, that's my kid.
That's mine. I'll take him. And they just handed the kids out like candy. In the fall of 2013, the report goes on, in the fall of 2013, tens of thousands of unaccompanied minors traveled to the U.S. southern border in flight from poverty and gang violence in Central America. At least 6 of those children were eventually resettled on an egg farm in Marion, Ohio, where their sponsors forced them to work 12 hours a day under threats of death. Local law enforcement uncovered the operation late last year, prompting the Senate's Permanent Subcommittee on Investigations to open an inquiry into the government's handling of migrants. The agency placed 90,000 migrant children into sponsor care between 2013 and 2015. Exactly how many of those children fell into the prey of traffickers remains unknown because the agency does not keep track. They don't even know what happened. 90,000 kids, they're gone. They don't know where they are. Gone with the wind. Sorry, we just don't keep track of those records. That's what they're saying. This is during the Obama administration. It's a New York Magazine. Report came out in 2016. And yet you've got these people, these same people lecturing Trump. Give me a break.
Well, that's the their only tactic so far, the opposite world tactic. If you're guilty of that offense, then blame the other side for that exact same thing, and then run with that narrative.
Right.
That's their number one tactic.
Literally flip the script. Literally turn it around, mirror image, 180 degrees. That's what they do. I mean,
in every case.
And we're reading a report from New York Magazine about a Senate Intel or a Senate Investigation Committee report, bipartisan, that determined Obama gave away 90,000 kids, probably to human traffickers. We don't even know where most of them ended up. They don't keep records on it. And yet the mainstream media won't cover it. They'll look at you with a straight face and say, sorry, that's not important. Trump's a racist. We've got to go after Trump. And they'll look at you with a straight face and tell you that. These people are living in another dimension. It is another version of everything that we see in the world around us. To them, there are 3 genders or 4 genders or 8 genders or whatever genders. To them, inviting in people who say they want to kill you is a good idea. To them, signing a nuclear arms agreement while those very same people that you're signing it with are outside chanting death to America, to them, that's a wise move and a good idea and a show of American solidarity and diplomacy. These people are backwards. What can you do? Reasoning with a liberal these days is like trying to carve smoke. It is impossible. There is no doing it. There is no trying it. It's not going to happen.
Yeah, they've taken derangement to a whole new level, and I say, quite frankly, I said just keep on doing exactly what you're doing because it's working in our favor. The spread on the midterm elections look like it's pretty much even now, or narrowed to something that's within statistical probability, and we still have another 5 months to go.
Yeah, well, this is one particular poll that I looked at, and so take it with a grain of salt, of course.
But if you look at all the polls, right?
Yeah.
I mean, the direction has been going that way, and I know that if you looked at the combination poll, I think the Dems probably still have like a 4 or 5% lead or something like that.
Well, I looked at one poll that's been pretty good over the years that tends to fly under the radar is the Reuters generic poll, the Reuters generic average of midterm polls. And the Reuters generic poll has Republicans up +6.
Mm-hmm.
Now, again, the statistical margin of error is ±3. So, you could argue that. But the bottom line is the last time the Republicans had this big a lead, they took 55 seats.
Right. So they're not going to lose anything in the Senate. If anything, they may even gain a seat or 2. Right. And in Congress, at least with the poll numbers that we have right now, they might lose some seats, but they'll still maintain a majority.
Right. Yep. And I love what Trump tweeted to them this weekend. He said, "Don't wait till after the midterms. You're going to lose anyway, Democrats." He said, "Deal with the immigration thing now. Don't wait. You're going to lose anyway." I mean, it was just great. He just taunted them. He just absolutely taunted them this weekend with these tweets. I mean, just sent them into a real tizzy. Absolutely, destroyed them. He said Democrats are good at only 3 things: high taxes, high crime, and obstruction. I mean, he really nails these people down on Twitter every time, every weekend, every day. And he just keeps banging away. He's got 52.9 million followers now, bigger than ever. And the winning just continues. And we're going to continue following it on the show and hopefully winning ourselves. Wow, look at that. We've already been going for 40 some odd minutes. Are we missing anything, Ernie? Did I forget something? Are we forgetting something? Is there anything on the horizon that you're watching?
Oh, there's so many things. I just don't know where to begin. on the Bitcoin front, a lot of people are getting all excited, thinking that Ethereum and other coins are going to not be considered securities. So some people think that there's a crack there, but the SEC really hasn't changed their stance at all. But other than that, I'm really interested in this 5 rules of Trump. I really want to sit here and try to figure out, kind of deconstruct his plan or what's on his mind and how he's staying in front. Something that we can all learn from.
Yeah. Let's see what Bitcoin's doing now. Alexa, what's the price of Bitcoin?
1 Bitcoin is worth $6,720, up 3.4% over the last 24 hours.
Yeah. Yeah. It went up a little bit today, but it was another one of those pumps. And You can tell the pumps every time. There's a period of about 2 or 3 minutes And then all of a sudden, one actor comes in there and just pumps in, I don't know, 10, 20, $100 million, and it pumps it up a couple hundred points.
Yeah.
And then, of course, the entire cryptoverse, they get all excited thinking that, oh, this is where it's turning around. The trend is reversing.
Breakout signal activated. Buy. Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's the way it goes. That's the way it goes. But we're going to keep tracking the crypto stuff. We've been with it all along. We've been, I think, right more than we've been wrong about cryptocurrency. And I think that'll continue. So make sure to tune in on Thursday, folks. We'll be back. We've got a lot of new stuff that we're announcing. You can, of course, follow Ernie at Trader of Futures, traderoffutures.com on Twitter, Trader of Futures, YouTube, you name it. You can follow me at Jacob A. Wool. Follow both of our work at thewashingtonreporter.com. You can even donate there and check out my writing on the Gateway Pundit, new stuff. Always there. So lots to follow, lots to talk about, and we'll be back on Thursday. Thanks for listening.